and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Nick Shaw is the co-founder of Renaissance Periodization, a health and fitness company that has improved the lives of hundreds of thousands of clients around the world. Nick's story, and the story of Renaissance Periodization, also known as RP, has appeared in a Forbes feature story, which chronicled RP's rise from a small business into an influential tech company with an industry-leading diet tracking app. Nick has also helped to coach numerous world-class athletes, including CrossFit Games champions, international medalists in weightlifting, UFC fighters, Navy SEALs, and Olympians. Nick is the co-host of the RP Strength podcast with his wife and RP colleague, Lori Shaw. Nick holds a bachelor's in sports management from the University of Michigan, where he helped establish a scholarship for undergraduate kinesiology students, and from which he received the Early Career Achievement Award. Nick is the author of the book Fit for Success, which he published in 2020. He currently resides in Charlotte, North Carolina, with his wife and 2 kids. Nick Shaw, what an honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, it's such an honor to welcome you here. Your work in your pretty early career is pretty impressive, I have to say. We did mention the University of Michigan. I understand you're a huge University of Michigan sports fan. Is that correct?
That would absolutely be correct. Pretty diehard Wolverine, I must say so.
Well, that's great. As a Utah fan here in the Salt Lake Valley, huge fan of the Utah Utes. We thoroughly enjoyed coming up to Michigan in 2013 and ended up getting mostly rained out. So there was a huge delay, but they ended up getting the win in the big house. And then we actually beat you guys again here in Salt Lake City with Coach Jim. Oh, I'm going to forget his name. Jim Harbaugh was his very first game. Is that right?
It was his very first game. Ironically, Utah also beat Michigan in 2008. Is Rich Rodriguez as one of his first games.
Oh, wow. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, I was actually there. Yeah, I worked for the football team. That's why I remember it. So, hey, we don't do well against you guys.
Well, unfortunately, Utah couldn't take care of Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. It was our first time to the Rose Bowl. And we would have loved to polish them off and almost pulled it off.
I was rooting so hard for Utah. You wouldn't believe it.
Oh, thanks, man. If you guys were playing BYU, we'd be rooting for you guys hard too. So it's reciprocated for sure. That's great. Well, tell us a little bit about how you became so interested in fitness. I love hearing your personal story, which you've told a few times on different podcasts. But for our listeners, do you mind telling them how you got so interested in fitness to begin with?
Yeah, man, that probably has to go way back into high school. And it's one of those things where I had an older brother who played sports and had one of those old rackety weight sets with sand weights and a bench you could barely fit your head in between to lay down the bench. And, I just saw him lifting and working out. And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I got an older brother. I want to be strong like him. So I started doing a little bit of lifting. And, of course, it's just the bench press curls, the good stuff, right? And I don't know, but just something just clicked with me. And I was like, wow, I really like this. And I really think it's the whole idea and concept of if I put in hard work and input X, I get out the output, Y. And it's it's a very clear relationship of if I do this and if I work harder, generally speaking, I get better results. And I was like, man, this is really cool. Why wouldn't everyone do this? And then I kind of get into high school and started doing some sports myself and, wanted to be pretty good. I definitely wasn't blessed with great genetics. Thanks, mom and dad. I'm 5'9", so certainly don't have the height and certainly not one of the quickest people when I played sports or anything like that. But I actually was into running, and we were told one summer to run 100 miles, not in total, just over the course of the summer to get ready for fall cross country. And I was not very good my freshman year being on the cross country team. I think we had 9 people. The top 7 made varsity. I didn't even run varsity. So it was not good would be an understatement. But I was the only person, or maybe one of 2 people, that actually put in all the work that summer. And then the first day of practice, my sophomore year, I was up running with the top people from the year before. And I thought, what in the world is going on here? And it clicked. And I go, oh. I started chatting with them. Turns out no one else had put in the work over the summer. And I thought, oh, this is the winning ticket right here. This is how you do it. And from that day forward, it was like something, it just clicked. It just resonated with me. And I was like, I'm never going to be super, super talented, but man, I can just work my tail off. And if I do that, I'll at least have a shot. And so that's what drew me to fitness. And it's just the whole idea, the whole concept of getting better, pushing, doing more. You can get better. You can always get faster or stronger or leaner, etc. I just love it. So that is how it was born way back in the day.
Yeah. Wow. I really love that. As a fellow 5'9" person, I also blame my parents for, never making it into my NHL career. Thanks a lot. But yeah, no, you're right. I find that piece of fitness to be its own reward almost. It's so enticing to know that if you do the work, you are going to see some rate of return. You might not have all the genetics, but you can improve yourself.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that idea. I love that concept. I love, honestly, at the core of it, if we really want to get down to it, it's like I love the idea of self-improvement, of getting better, of pushing myself. You don't see these huge quantum leaps, especially in fitness. I think that relates to many other areas of life as well. But, especially fitness, when you think about it, you don't gain 100 pounds to your bench or your squat or anything like that overnight. It just requires work, patience, consistency. Man, I just love that whole concept. And I've been at it for, probably at least 20 years now of my life. I'm only 34. So I've been doing it most of my life. And I kind of was just laughing the other day because I have a home gym in my house here in North Carolina. And I was listening to some like Eminem music. And I grew up in Michigan, of course. So just always been an Eminem fan. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I used to listen to these same songs almost 20 years ago. And they fired me up then, and they still fire me up today. And I was just like, that's really, really neat. I'll use the word neat, but how about that? Like 20 years later, I'm still doing, and I'm not mad at that. Like, I still love it. So I don't know, I just love fitness, man. It's just part of my identity. It's part of who I am.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you mentioned patience, and that's where we get the value from the exercise. Like, yeah, you have to chip away at this, and it's going to take a long time, and you need to be patient with it. But that's why it's so important and so valuable. If it were easy and we could, give everybody the magic pill, it wouldn't mean anything to anybody.
Exactly. And that's, so the whole idea of working hard, getting better is one of my sort of core life philosophies. The other one would be the idea of the slight edge principle. And it's that same concept you just mentioned. It's just, you keep doing these little small things day after day. And it really doesn't seem like much is happening. It doesn't really seem like much progress is happening. Maybe not even forward progress is being made every day. Or it's so minor, you don't even notice it. But just keep doing it. You just keep after it. And then months, years, really, potentially even decades down the line, you've made just monumental, huge changes. And a lot of people miss that because they want those quick, instant results overnight. And so they'll just get frustrated or they'll quit after, a few weeks, a few months, something like that. But I don't know, that just goes back to that whole mindset of, well, I just know that a lot of people probably are going to quit. So I'm just going to keep at it. And I'm going to keep chipping away day after day, week after week, year after year. I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's what creates the true professional. When everybody else is quitting because they're more amateur, the pro stays at it and does the work no matter what, no matter if it's hard, if it's raining, if it's snowing, it doesn't matter. They do the work. And you're right. Like over time, you see the separation in somebody who is a very good coach, a very good trainer, a very good nutrition coach versus somebody who just got into the game to sell a few things and then got frustrated when they realized like, this is 100% commission. I'm not selling as much as I should. I don't know as much as I should. And then they quit. And you just missed out on all the good stuff that would pay off later on down in life.
Yep. It goes back to what's your time horizon? And many people's time horizons are narrow and short. And my time horizon is, I try to think in the span of not necessarily even months, but really more like years and even potentially decades. And it's a really hard concept to get. And I certainly don't think I've been great at it all the time, but it's something that lasts like a few years of my life that I've really focused on. And it's just something that I try to remind myself of because it is, if you play the long game, you're going to be so much better off. You're going to make so many different and better choices. It's just really unbelievable.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. So at some point, your interest becomes a career. When did fitness, kind of enter your consciousness as something you actually wanted to do for your career?
I would say probably in college. I was just really into sports, really into fitness, working out, all that good stuff. And I met a guy in the gym, ironically, right? Of course, it's going to be in the gym. And he was a couple years ahead of me in school. And he was like, hey, you should join a powerlifting club. And I said, right, well, it sounds kind of right up my alley. And just another kind of light bulb went off. And I was like, oh man, this is it. I get to compete in lifting. I get to push myself, challenge myself. Like this is definitely, my next thing. And lo and behold, he ended up being the co-founder of RP with me. So that was really when it kind of became clear. It's like, hey, I can actually make a living out of this potentially the rest of my life. And so we worked as personal trainers in New York City after college. And then we kind of realized that maybe our time wasn't best spent training people in person because we had to travel all over the city and all that. And I just, man, this is really, really hard. So we actually started doing some online coaching. And this was like a decade ago. So kind of before it was super popular. Wow. And all that. And that was really like the start of RP about a decade ago. So actually 2022 is more or less our 10-year anniversary.
That's amazing. Yeah, so amazing. Such an early adapter to a new form, new way to train people. I'm so curious about the name. How did you choose the name?
Yeah. People always like to know that. So I guess that goes into two parts. People always said, hey, did you ever have any idea you'd be even remotely successful? And I go, well, no, because why would we have chosen that funny, crazy name, right? Like it was something that, it was just me and my buddy who started a company. We thought we were just going to write, programs for close friends, family, things like that. So, Renaissance is really like the rebirth. So for us, it was the rebirth of evidence-based fitness practices in the space because we saw a lot of people doing some really interesting things when we worked as trainers and coaches in New York City. And we just thought, man, I wonder if there's just like a better way. So my buddy had his master's in strength and conditioning after U of M, and then he later went on to get his PhD in sports science, exercise physiology. So we just thought that there was a good opportunity to bring back evidence-based practices into the fitness space. So that was the Renaissance part. The periodization comes down to sort of using one phase to set up the next in sort of a logical manner. For example, we just had the Winter Olympics not too long ago. Well, you can imagine that those folks train a heck of a lot differently in the days, weeks, or months leading into the Olympics than they do, a couple of years out. So it was kind of, that's how the name came to be. Also, I should say a shout out. The Renaissance part also kind of ties into Renaissance Technologies, which is a hedge fund in Long Island. They basically replaced like stockbrokers and things like that with mathematicians, PhDs, physicists, all that stuff. And so that was really what we were trying to do. We were trying to, hey, let's not just do fitness stuff because, we think this is right or this kind of like the next fad or the trend. It's like, no. We want to have coaches that are PhDs, registered dietitians, et cetera, that one, they can talk the talk, right? Because they're qualified to the nth degree academically, but also they're competitive athletes themselves. The world-class grapplers, national level weightlifters, et cetera, all that. So when you have the best, right, when you can walk the walk and talk the talk, it's really hard to argue with those folks. And that's really what we wanted to do at RP.
What kind of format were you using to coach your people?
Excel files.
Nice. And so would you put specific like sets, reps, exercises, and nutritional recommendations just in an Excel sheet, excuse me?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. Whether they wanted nutrition help, whether they wanted training help, we would do either or a combination of both. And that's how we started. We would send the programs. We would communicate with people by email, mostly, sometimes social media. And, because we go back in time, 2012, 2013, even into 14, Instagram was just getting started and we kind of caught that at the right time. And, with fitness and before and afters and all that, it really, really caught on. People seemed to like what we were doing. We thought, well, how do we take this coaching model that we have? We're very, very confident in what we do and what we know and how we help people. How do we get this out to more people? And that's when we wrote our first ever ebook. The Renaissance Diet 1.0 that came out in 2014. And man, all of a sudden, that reached, thousands of people the first week. And again, another light bulb went on saying, holy crap, like this is a really good way, cool way to reach more people, to help more people. Honestly, at the end of the day, what do we really want to do above all else? We want to help as many people as we can, just to make sure they're not falling for fads or gimmicks and stuff in the fitness space. Like, let's give these folks evidence-based practices that work above all else. Of course, treat them well, good customer service and all that. But at the end of the day, we just want to deliver a product that works. And so how do we do that and potentially get it to as many people as we can? That's where the digital product thing came in with the ebook, later led to our diet templates in 2015. And that's when we really kind of RP caught on in the fitness space.
Something I was curious about that I wanted to ask you was, what is the importance of really starting something before you have like the perfect finished product? Like starting something before you're like fully ready, before you fully think you're absolutely, completely prepared. Why do you think that's so important?
I think that if you wait for quote unquote the perfect opportunity or the product to be quote unquote perfect, chances are you'll never actually get it out there, and you'll never actually really test it out, because there's always something more that can be done. You can always learn a little bit more. You can always fine tune, tweak, change some copy or some text, all this stuff. Like, there's always a little bit more to be done. At some point, you just have to make that call, and you just have to be willing and able kind of to know and to understand that, like, it's not going to be perfect when it goes out. And that's okay, because sometimes you just got to get it out there and you got to get feedback from real live, paying customers, or, at least beta test it, something like that, because all the preconceived notions you have about it could turn out to be 100% correct or 100% incorrect, right? And you just don't know until you get it out there. So really, that's what you got to do, is get something out there, get that feedback from folks, learn what they like, what they don't like, and then just keep making little tweaks and adjustments as you go along. And there really is no such thing as perfect. You have to be, I guess, okay with the idea of that you'll make some little mistakes, little failures along the way. And so long as you learn from them, you should be good to go.
I was just going to say, those small failures are learning. So that's absolutely what you should be doing, is taking that information, progressing, finding a new way, being creative, getting quiet with yourself so that you can find something different. I love that approach. And I love that you guys took that approach. I think that's so critically important. I'm glad we got to cover that. So I do want to talk to you about the science behind fitness and what a quagmire all of this can be sometimes. And I do want to start with periodization. For a lot of people, I find they don't exactly know what periodization is in fitness. So can you explain a little bit more in detail? I know you already mentioned it, but can you explain a little bit more in detail what periodization is?
Yeah, sure. I think the Olympics in like a 4-year training block is a real good example. So I'll just briefly touch on that again. So, well, actually, no, I'll give a better example. So a lot of people watch, professional sports in the US. So think about a football player. And if you have a strength and conditioning coach that knows anything, you're not training the same as you are in the off season as you are during the season. Like, you can train differently, and you should be training differently, because pro athlete during the season, they just want to kind of maintain everything. They don't want to get hurt. So you alter everything. So that's sort of one, season out of the year. And then when you get done with the season, obviously you need a little time to rest, but your training should look quite a bit different, sort of getting ready, getting better, getting faster, bigger, stronger, whatever that is. And then you make those improvements, and then you sort of hang on to it during the season, right? You're not necessarily making huge changes during the season, because your time is much more spent, hey, how do you practice, learn, watch film, all that stuff. So that's maybe one example that might resonate a little bit more. Another one that could resonate with your audience would be, let's say you have 100 pounds to lose. Do you just go on a diet and try to lose 100 pounds in a row? Oh, I don't know. Gee whiz, that seems pretty tough to do. What if you periodized it and broke it down into some chunks, where they're, hey, I'm going to lose 25 pounds over the next 3 to 4 months. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to maintain those results for a couple of months. Okay. And then I'm going to get back at it, and I'm going to lose another 25 pounds. I'm going to rinse and repeat that. Like, that would be a good example of periodization. So losing the 100 pounds, it's not going to happen in 3 to 4 months. And I mean, that just doesn't happen. If you want to do it in a smart, intelligent way that's actually going to last. But, hey, it might take a year. It might take a year and a half. So it's like you diet for a few months, then you maintain. So it's like the idea of 3 steps forward, but instead of 1 step back, which, usually that's how that analogy goes, or that phrase goes. So you go 3 steps forward, then you just step to the side a little bit. And that's it. That's kind of the idea of periodization, is you just use one phase to set up the next phase to be more productive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. It makes me think of the specificity of the event being so critically important, whether it's losing 100 pounds, whether it's the Olympics. You got a 4-year training cycle. I mean, all of those guys were trying to peak for one specific like weekend, one day in a week for 4 years. And now it's like the Olympics are over and yeah, you've got some World Cup races or something, but for the most part, those guys are totally resting. They've been focusing on one thing for years and years of their life, and contrast that with somebody who is maybe like a Major League Soccer player where a season might be 10 months out of the year. You really need to be very specific when making recommendations for people as far as the periodization goes.
Yeah, it's really tough. Well, let's think about the 2020 Olympics, right? The Summer Olympics. What happened to those? They were delayed a year.
Totally.
I mean, I know in the grand scheme of things, there's so much other stuff going on in the real world and real life. But as an athlete who does train for, a specific time, basically their entire life, more or less, that is absolutely crazy to get pushed back a year. It just really messes with that. And again, I know it's a super small thing in, the grand scheme of the entire world and COVID and everything that was happening. So I'm not trying to like compare the two or anything like that. But from an athlete perspective, it really is just crazy. And then with all the restrictions and everything at the Olympics, and they had to just sleep on all this weird stuff, like, man, if you were an athlete there, it was definitely not set up to be optimal. So kudos to all the athletes that, did well, potentially hit PRs, new records, all that stuff. It really is amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I couldn't agree more. You look at a sport like gymnastics, you don't have forever to be optimal and a gold medal contender in gymnastics. You have a very, very tight window, and a year is a huge amount of time when you've been targeting this one event for 4 years and it gets pushed back a year. That's a crazy major thing. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I totally agree. Let's contrast that with somebody that's maybe like in a general, fitness phase. Let's say they're maybe maintaining, they're in a good spot. They're not necessarily training for an event. How would a person like that look at their training and fitness and nutrition differently than somebody who is training for specific events on specific dates?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, here's the good news. If you don't have crazy goals, and you just want to train to be healthier and, maybe lose a little bit of weight, look a little bit better, things like that, you have just a lot more flexibility with how you approach things. So you don't have to be as rigid. You don't have to be as, hardcore when it comes to slowly lowering calories, anything like that. You don't have to be so rigid with sticking to your training plan perfectly. Here's the big thing. If you're just training for general fitness and, again, all that good stuff, better health, look better, etc., you have to think about it in terms of consistency is more important than perfection. And let's think of like one of those old school, like volume knobs on a stereo. And as your goals get more serious, well, you also have to dial up the level of seriousness with your nutrition and training. So if you're a professional athlete, well, you should probably be changing that. You should be turning that volume knob up quite a bit to be more serious. Now, here's the funny part. And genetics play a huge, huge role in all of this, especially in sports. I've personally seen a lot of professional athletes that have not very good, nutrition and training sort of habits. And you think to yourself, how in the world are they professional athletes? It doesn't make any sense. A lot of them can be very, very productive, sort of in spite of what they do because their genetics are so good. So, and I only bring that up because when we use that volume knob analogy and you sort of picture it, like the people at the top must really, really be dialed in. Man, that's not the case oftentimes. Now, of course, there are many examples of folks that are, which is absolutely phenomenal. But that's really the big difference. Just the more general your goals are, like the more flexible you can be with the way you approach things, which for most people, that's awesome news because that means training twice a week is absolutely better than not training at all. And if you have a little bit more serious goals, well, maybe then are training 3-4 times a week and your nutrition can be, kind of think of the 80-20 rule. You can eat very, very good 80% of the time, but, hey, every now and again, you want to have some foods that you enjoy, go out with friends and family. Like you totally can and should if you're just looking to maintain your weight and kind of just have good habits overall.
Sure. My nutrition coaching certification is precision nutrition. And we were taught to kind of divide people into different levels. So you'd have levels 1 through 3. And level 1 would be, 98% of the people probably listening to this podcast who are out there, where it's you're just looking at some of those general things. And we're working on simple habits, making sure you're chewing your food properly, including, some fruits and vegetables, making sure that you're having protein with every meal. And it's just kind of those behavior coaching things where you're not really deep diving. I'm not giving very specific recommendations to that person. And that goes all the way up to a level 3, which could be like an athlete who has that stereo knob dialed up all the way. And it's like, okay, no more generalization. You eat exactly this, maybe needs to be like weighed out at exactly this time on this day. And I don't care whether you're in the mood to eat it. I don't care whether you have the ability to cook it or not. Like, you find a way and you go out and do it. And those are two very different things.
Totally. That's actually a really good way to look at it. So when you have a beginner, it's just like, hey, yeah, like you said, your goal, hey, focus on protein and vegetables at every meal. You do that, you're on the right track. You're going to do quite well. Hey, but you're, an Olympian who's training multiple times a day. Yeah, guess what? You might have to weigh, you have to measure things. Guess what? You might have to time things, because you get done with practice 1, you got to make sure you're fueling up properly so you're ready to go practice 2 later on in the day. Like, it's just a lot more serious. So it really just depends on the goals. And it's just such good news, because I think sometimes people, when they're first getting started, they think that they have to be so perfect that it gets a little overwhelming. And, I think we all have that feeling when we're starting something new. So that's understandable. But a good coach, like you said, should be able to kind of break that down a little bit and be like, hey, listen here, I'm going to cut you the real deal. You just have to do these couple things and you're going to get, 70% of the way there. And I think that's pretty good. So let's just do that at first, get you comfortable with all this. Then we'll start turning up the dial it in, I guess is the right way.
Yeah, I love that. So whether somebody has a coach or not, how can somebody tell whether their plan is working versus when they need to take a pivot or change things up?
Well, a good way is the scale. Of course, if you're trying to lose weight or gain weight, you're monitoring that a couple times a week. You don't have to be super crazy with it every day or anything like that. But that's going to be a good way. Now, it's certainly not the only way, and not the only one that I would ever suggest. A lot of it is, there's really like an art and a science of coaching. And, we get to talk about the science all day long, right? And think, oh, the optimal way to do this is, X, Y, and Z. But then the real world hits and you have to interact with people that are living real lives and work and stress and kids, blah, 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 all that stuff. And sometimes you have to find that middle ground. So being able to work with people and sort of meet them, I don't want to call it halfway, but, a little bit on the way of where they are, it's a real big deal for a lot of folks, because a mistake that I made early on, maybe 5-6 years ago, was I was working with some pretty elite level athletes. And I actually was so proud of this one diet plan that I wrote out. Like, this person was training 3 times a day. Man, I had everything timed out perfectly based on their schedule that they'd sent me. And I was like, man, this is my best work ever. And then I sent it to the person and they just never stuck with it. And it didn't hit me right then, but I was like, I was almost, I'm not wanting to get offended, but I was almost like, what in the world's going on here? Like, I can't believe this. I was like, this is literally this is like my Mona Lisa, right? And then, come to find out about it, I started thinking more about it, because I'm like, what did I do wrong here? I was just really going deep. I'm like, what could I have done differently? I don't understand it. And then, like, the same thing happened to me again later on with another, real high level athlete. And I was like, okay, I got to figure something out here. Like, what am I doing wrong? And I was just like, I started talking with some other folks and they're like, have you thought about just dialing it back a little bit? Like, not being so intense. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, these people are the best in the world. Like, they're like, but they're not actually following it. So what good is the plan you're sending them? And I was like, oh man, that's a good way to look at it. And that's when I started changing my approach a little bit. And the art of coaching came into play. And I was like, okay, I have to trade off a bit of quote unquote optimality for letting them actually stick to and adhere to the plan. And once I realized that, I probably became a 10 times better coach overnight.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a good realization. I think if you've been training for any period of time, you can totally relate to your story. I had a guy hire me once, like twice a week for a specific trip he was taking in 4 months, had very specific body comp goals. And so I wrote out the perfect meal plan, the perfect periodized workout programs, like micro, macro, the whole thing, like everything done. And he comes in the first day and I'm like, okay, we got a pull day. We're going to do deadlifts. We're going to do some rows. We're going to do them like this. We're going to progress in this way. And he goes, biceps. I said, wait, well, no, we'll do some biceps. We're doing pulls, but we're going to do some deadlifts first. He's like, no, I want to do biceps on Monday and I want to do chest on Thursday. And so it's like, okay, here we go. We're going to have to pivot. I remember I would always set the curl bar.
To the beach.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I would always at least set the curl bar like on the ground in front of him. So I had to like trick him into doing at least one deadlift per workout. But
oh man. Yeah, for sure.
You're right. You have to adjust those things based on the person and what they want and what they can do. I'm really glad you made that point. This is an extremely general question. I wonder if you can address this. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but how do you balance, typically speaking, generally speaking, resistance training with cardiovascular training?
Yeah, great question. It depends really on what the person's goals are and, what their time restrictions are. If someone works at home and they have a ton of time, well, hey, it's going to be, hey, let's have you lift like probably at least 3 times a week. Like that's a really, real good start. And then for cardio, if you don't have performance goals, you're not trying to do races or anything like that, I'm going to say, hey, let's get you a little step tracker or something like that, real simple and easy. And let's just see where you're at a couple of days. Like just do life normal. Don't go out of your way to do a lot more stuff. Let's see where you're at. Let's say it's, 6,000 steps a day. I'm going to say, all right, cool. Let's try bumping that up to like 8,000. And it's just a little bit of a change. That might mean they get out and walk for, an extra, 30 minutes or something like that. Man, that's really simple and easy to do. Usually it's a good stress reliever. You got a dog, you got a kid, push them in the stroller, something like that. It's kind of a win-win all around. So that's maybe one approach for more general fitness. Now, if you had someone that was training for a race, it kind of goes back to that volume knob. And now we have to start turning that up a little bit. And we're probably going to want to, hey, the time that you lift versus the time that you run, we might actually start doing those on different days and, different things like that. So, man, I know it's one of those questions that the answer no one really likes because it depends. But it really just does. And here's another thing. So if you have someone that wants to lose weight and they're just like New York City businessmen, super just time crunch, they don't have time to do cardio. It might very well be they lift for like 30 minutes and then you're having them do some HIIT cardio for like 10, 15 minutes after. So they're done in like 40 minutes. They can shower, they can get back to work. And like, that's it, because that's all they really have time for. Now, hopefully the good news is they live in New York City. They're probably getting in a lot of steps anyways, because you usually just walk a lot in New York. Like I lived there for 6 years. It's kind of crazy how much, I never had a step tracker back then, but up and down subway, all that. So yeah, that definitely plays a role too. But the more flexibility people have, the more freedom, time, work from home, man, hey, get out, move around, walk around. It doesn't have to be anything super crazy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I would have somebody do low intensity cardio, as much movement as they could fit in the day. But if they had a limited amount of time, I would agree with you. I think the time is best spent in the resistance side of the gym versus the cardio side of the gym, even though the treadmill is going to say you burned X number of calories, but I'd rather know that somebody's burning more calories all the time by building muscle mass, getting stronger, that kind of thing, working for them. Yeah, I love that. So this was a concept that I was not introduced to early on in my career with training. It took a few years and a lot of like metabolic testing using metabolic cart to really realize this. But can you explain why periodization with fitness and nutrition is so important to couple those two things together?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of a good analogy for kind of like general fitness folks to understand. So I'm probably not going to use a great example here, but let's say think of a weightlifter that is trying to peak for a specific meet. And so usually as you peak and kind of taper into a meet, your training volume really goes down. So that would not be a good time to also reduce your calories and try to cut really hard. So to keep as much lean muscle, lean tissue as you can, typically you want to train with fairly high volumes. So kind of think of old school kind of bodybuilding training, that's usually best to like maintain muscle. Like there's a reason bodybuilders look the way they do, right? So you wouldn't want to be trying to diet really hard and not train very much with weights, because what's going to happen? Well, you're probably going to lose lean tissue. And we just talked about it. You don't want to lose lean tissue. We want to hold on to that really at kind of all costs, more or less. So that's maybe a good example on how the two sort of overlap with one another.
Yeah, no, that's a really good explanation. I'm also thinking like maybe like an endurance athlete, may be able to get away with like, more protein, maybe some more fat in an off season where they're just building up their aerobic base. But during training season, they may need an extra boost and they have to increase carbohydrates or things like that. Is that kind of how you're thinking about that as well?
Yes, that's also the case. So, someone that's just putting in tons and tons and tons of miles, tons and tons of volume, right? And that volume can actually be lifting, or it could be running, cardio, etc. The demands are going to go up for their carbohydrates. So they should absolutely be eating more carbohydrates for a better sporting performance.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you guys approach nutrition in a way that's not dogmatic. It doesn't follow one particular camp and, scream that that's the best thing to do ever for everybody all the time. It really does seem very pragmatic and practical. Can you tell us some of the kind of general guidelines, again, very high level, but some of the general guidelines you believe in nutrition that pretty much everybody could benefit from?
Sure. So we have this pyramid that we created as nutritional priorities. So literally on one half of it, you have adherence, right? So again, it goes back to the story about me working with athletes that never followed the plan, even though I thought it was amazing. Lesson learned. But without adherence, none of this really matters, right? Like we're basically, how do we create a plan that people can actually follow? So that's sort of the overriding principle, main theme that we have to focus on. Beyond that, it really is your calorie balance. So if you want to lose weight, it's like, how does that look? How many calories are you burning versus how many you can consume? Now, that's not to say the calories are the only thing that matters. Of course not. We would never say that. But it is really like sort of the engine to the car. If we want to get anywhere, we got to make sure that that's good to go. And now, again, I'm talking about from the perspective of improving body composition. So maintaining lean tissue, losing fat, being able to perform adequately. So that's where I'm coming from when I lay out these priorities here. So we got adherence, we got calorie balance. Then we're going to talk about the macronutrient ratios. So the main one we always start with is protein. Protein's first, especially when it comes to lean tissue and sports and all that. And then carbohydrates usually come second for us, and that's because we're a little bit more performance focused. If we were just more pure general health, protein's still going to be first, and then that split of fats and carbs are a little more interchangeable. That's why before we started the podcast, we were chatting, and you said maybe your crowd's a little bit more lower carb, and I was like, oh, okay, well, people probably know of RP is not being low carb, that's fine. But we do think there's absolutely good times and places to do lower carbs. So it's not like we're not dogmatic about it, right? Because there's absolutely good cases to be made for low carbs in specific instances and all that good stuff. But yeah, so after the calories and then after macros, we're going to get into smaller details like nutrient timing, and then even sort of like food quality, food composition, and things like supplements. So that kind of rounds out how we look at it.
Yeah, but you're starting with the foundation of, the whole foods and just making sure that people are getting adequate amounts of protein, which I absolutely love. And then you're leaving things like supplements, again, the magic pill that most people are looking for, it doesn't exactly exist if you don't have that foundation laid first.
100%, yeah. So one of the cool things, what's the easiest way to kind of just improve general nutrition for most people? Well, it's not super, super complicated. And it does all tie into, I guess, calorie balance in a nutshell, because if you get people eating protein at every meal, usually eating some veggies at each meal, and more or less just eating, real whole foods rather than, processed foods, you're getting sort of into a better calorie balance by default. And so that's like one of these crazy things, because people, love the, keto or Whole30, et cetera, RP, macro counting, if it fits your macros. Well, it's like, what are the commonalities at the end of the day between all of these? And that's why we're not so dogmatic. And it's like, well, if you just eat mostly good foods, you get the calorie balance kind of by default. And I always like to say, and I'm partially kidding here, but you can't overeat by, eating veggies and broccoli, right? It's damn near impossible. So it's like, if you just start eating better and cut back on those super tasty, hyper palatable foods, and it's much harder to overeat.
Yeah, I love that. It's also interesting too. You mentioned performance, and I know you guys do work with a lot of high performing athletes. And it's funny. You get into this world and you see a lot of those high performing people, and yeah, you're worried about really minute details, and all of these things need to be totally dialed in. When you go to the mall or go walk around or something, you see like the general population has a long way to go, and just making some small strides to get out like vegetable oils or like processed foods, like you mentioned, hyper palatable foods, sugar all the time, like too much of it all the time is kind of more of a priority versus, figuring out the details from the very beginning.
Yeah, no, I mean, just go walk into a mall and look at the food court. You just think, holy cow. Here's the thing, because this goes back to what you had said, starting people out at like a beginner level. I mean, there's so many people out there. If you ask them what a macronutrient is, they would have no idea.
No idea.
And so if you started throwing like, oh, hey, you need X amount of protein, carbs, and fats per day, they'd look at you and be like,
Cinnabon.
Like you're speaking, like you're speaking a foreign language. So it's like, okay, how do I maybe approach this to make it easier to get them started? It's like, okay, hey, how about this? Don't eat these, 5 things. And it doesn't have to be a huge list to start. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, and now all of a sudden this person stops, drinking soda. So there's 2 cans a day, 40 grams of carbs each. Oh, okay, there's 80 grams of carbs in a day they're no longer consuming. That's 320 calories. That's a good start. It's like little things like that. Maybe now they're not getting fast food, so they eliminate that, quick drive-through at McDonald's or whatever a couple times a week. All right, boom, there's another 5, 6, 7, 800 calories. It's like you can just do these real simple things to get people started. And then it's like, it's just a good sort of a general awareness type thing as well, where like now they're maybe just slightly more aware of the food options and choices that they're making. And let's not overlook that, because that's huge, especially for people that are just getting started and don't really know a whole lot. So, hey, let's keep it simple for a lot of folks.
Yeah, that's great. Tell us a little bit, going back to your company, how things evolved. We kind of got to the point where you're using Excel sheets. You just started with ebooks. Technology has evolved quite a bit since then. Can you tell me what direction you and the company are moving now?
Yeah, so we're definitely more in the line of like a tech company now, because we do a mobile application. So you can get it through the Google Play Store. You can get it on Apple, and it's really, really cool. It's really, really nifty. I will say it's probably going to start people off a little more, higher carb in general, so to speak. But it's like a diet coach in your pocket. So rather than having to pay a couple $100s a month, which, unfortunately not everyone can afford, you basically pay $15 a month, and you tell the app what your goals are. You lay out your schedule, when you work out, when you wake up, when you go to sleep, et cetera, all this, how many meals you want per day. And then the app tells you exactly how much you eat at every single meal. So it's going to tell that based on macronutrient breakdown. So I would never suggest our app if someone's not already quite familiar with counting their macros, tracking their macros. And if they are, it would make a lot more sense. But for a beginner, it would be sort of like, jumping up to level 3, right? You sort of skip level 1 and level 2. But you do that. You track your weight in there a couple times a week. It tracks your progress weekly, and then it suggests updates to it. And so if you're on track, you'll kind of just keep cruising along. If you fall behind track or ahead of schedule, the app's going to make weekly suggestions. So it really is like having me coach someone, but through an app. And so rather than paying a couple $100s a month, pay $10 or $15 a month.
Yeah, that's great. It's so overlooked too, what you mentioned, which is like, if what you're doing is working, there's no need to make changes. I think people are so quick to change their program, but if it's giving you results, like just keep doing that until it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, totally. Well, so here, I mean, I've said this a bunch of times before. The goal when you're dieting to lose weight and to lose fat is to eat as much as you possibly can while still reaching your goals. Like there's no bonus points for jumping ahead and lowering calories more than needed, because chances are the more aggressive you go, right, the quicker, the faster you lose weight, typically speaking, the faster it's going to come back. So that's why we like that. Again, it goes back to what we talked to at the very beginning of the podcast. Play the long game. Have a longer term time horizon. Go a little bit slower, a little bit steadier, those results are going to be more lasting, more sustainable. And then you don't have this, binge thing, or you don't have this yo-yo dieting cycle. So it's like, if people can just delay gratification a little bit, and it's a hard thing for people, especially nowadays, they're going to be so much better off.
Yeah, I totally agree. Protecting that resting metabolic rate, the number of calories you burn at rest, is just so critically important. I see that crash pretty low when people are doing things that are more extreme in the short term versus, like you said, just being patient, take your time. Let's make small adjustments as we go. Get you some small wins would be more likely to give you more wins down the road. Yeah, I totally love that. So tell us a little bit about what sets your app apart. Obviously, you weren't the first diet tracking app. There were other ones out there, but what were you seeing or maybe not seeing in some of those apps that you wanted to bring to the table?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't even classify our app as a tracking app. I mean, it's really not. You can track some of it, yes, but it's more of a coach and more of a planning app. So if you're like, hey, I like using MyFitnessPal, but I don't know, gee whiz, I could tell it I ate 50,000 grams of carbs today. It's going to be like, okay, cool. It's just going to let you know you went over. And you're like, oh, okay. It doesn't tell you when to eat. It doesn't tell you how much to eat at each meal. That's a lot to the piece of the puzzle, right? So our app is going to tell you how much to eat on a per meal basis, based around your schedule, when you wake up, when you go to sleep, how many meals you want per day. Do you want 3 meals a day? Do you want 6 meals per day? Our app's going to help with that. So it's just more of a planning tool. And then you go in, you're like, oh, okay, hey, I need 40 grams of protein. Cool. I'm going to click on chicken breast. Or, hey, I'm going to scan my food here. It's going to tell me how much of that I need to sort of hit those goals. And now with our most recent update, because the app used to be a little bit more rigid on that, you couldn't really go over or under any. But now, like, you can, right? So if you're out and about and, you grab a Quest bar or something like that, oh, and hey, maybe you go a little bit over that meal or you're a little bit under, well, you just take whatever's left and you just kind of move it to the next meal. So it just allows a bit more of that real life practicality to our app. So I totally hear you on the tracker thing. Most people are familiar with something like MyFitnessPal as a tracking tool. I think of it as like a food diary. Our app is like MyFitnessPal, but we're going to help plan your meals out for you. We're going to help be there every step of the way along your dieting journey to reach your goals, no matter what they are. Fat loss, weight gain, performance, we got you covered.
Yeah, that's totally different than just tracking something and seeing like, gee whiz, I got X number of this and Y number of this. It doesn't really tell you anything. It's amazing that can adapt to you and help coach you along the way. It occurs to me to be able to create something like this, you may need like 1 or 2 like smart people around you. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your team? And you got a few good people there, a few smart guys, I would say, 1 or 2.
Yeah, if you are the smartest person in the room, they say you're in the wrong room, right? Well, luckily, I've never had that problem, so I'm on the right track, I guess. We've got a great team. So we've got 20 plus coaches on our side. I want to say it's at least 25 now. Pretty much every single one of them is a PhD or a registered dietitian that has, a master's degree in sort of a sport-related, nutrition-related field. That's on our coaching side. We have an incredibly talented team of engineers, software engineers that we work with that build our app and all of that stuff on the back end. They are phenomenal. My buddy, Dr. Mike, the co-founder of RP with me, is the smartest person I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So, he's really great at sort of creating all the algorithms and all that stuff behind the scenes. And, it's my job just to kind of help manage to make sure we're heading in the right direction.
Well, it's just so fun to like go down your website and pull down all the people in your team. And it's like you said, like doctor, RD, doctor, like, holy smokes, like you got a great team around him that I'm sure is just able to create so many interesting and customizable things for your clients, which is amazing. You guys also do a really great job of posting before and after photos and doing a good job of highlighting the stories of the people that use your products. Can you talk a little bit about why that's so important?
Yeah. So in terms of marketing, there's a great book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And one of the things in there is called social proof. And listen, there's so much out there that we don't know or can't possibly know that we look to other people to sort of guide our actions. So let's say you're living in New York City, or actually you said you're in Salt Lake City. Let's use Salt Lake City. You're walking downtown Salt Lake City and you see 10 people running towards you and running the other direction. What do you immediately think?
Yeah.
Like,
run with them.
oh crap, like something terrible has happened. Like I'm going to start running that direction too. So, the same thing applies when it comes to, online. And now there's so many different places and coaches and all that online that it can kind of be hard to figure out like, well, who actually knows what they're talking about? And, well, hey, does it work? Here's the thing. There used to be discussions about RP, several years ago, 5-6 years ago, something like that. And it was like, well, does RP really work? Nobody ever asks more questions that now. It's not, does RP work? It's, should I use RP, or is the app, right for me? It's no longer, hey, like these guys know what they're talking about. Yes, we do. We have so many, thousands, tens of thousands of clients that have had great results that it's just our results really speak for themselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is not really a question of whether this works or not, or whether I want to do the work and be able to do it because so many other people are showing those results, like you said, I think is fantastic. You've also written a book. Tell us a little bit about Fit for Success.
Yeah, Fit for Success was really my take on like the success. So we talked about the nutritional priorities before, but all of our books were centered really around nutrition, training, or recovery. I wanted to write a book that was a bit more applicable to everyday life of just what does it really take to be successful? And if you ask someone, what does success mean to you? Success means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It might be business, it might be personal finances, it might be fitness, it might be overcoming adversity or obstacles, things like that. But what I started to notice was, and I love reading, I pretty much, I've read, hundreds and hundreds of books here the last few years, is I started noticing a lot of common themes between people that were successful. And it didn't really matter like what area of their life, a lot of things sort of interwove with one another. And that's when the idea of the pyramid stood out to me. I was like, oh, well, why don't I create like the priorities? And so that's what I did. And so there's really 7 main, priorities to success. And it was also very personal for me because I wrote the book in 2020, and my wife was going through some health issues along with the pandemic and all that. So yeah, we had a rough 2020, and I just knew that all these things, living them in real life, were able to help get me through it. So if I could get some good and do something good for a lot of other people that I knew were also going through something real negative with 2020, that pandemic, all that it would really help a lot of folks. And so that's what I did. And the book came out in November of 2020, and very happy with the feedback and everything I've gotten from it. Tons and tons of good feedback. People love it. It's got a really long suggested reading list at the end too. I always like those when I'm reading a book. So yeah, that's it. I mean, if you want to, just kind of learn I'm not even going to call it secrets. There's no secrets to success, but just want a real practical guide. And the book's, less than 200 pages. You can read it in a few days. Check it out, and you're going to be better off. I can guarantee that if you read it.
That's great. Of the 7, what are some of the more foundational ones that you included to be successful?
I'm going to touch on my personal favorite one, internal locus of control. And what this means is, do you focus on the things that you actually have control over? For example, when it rains, do you focus on letting it ruin your day? Oh, this is a bad day. Oh, hey, woe is me. That's more of an external locus of control because you can't control the weather. You can't control whether or not it's going to rain. So focusing on that doesn't really make any sense. But on the flip side, people that tend to be more successful overall have more of an internal locus of control. So they focus on, okay, it is raining. So what? So now what? What do I do? Well, they focus on the things they actually have control over. They take an umbrella with them. They put on rain boots. They put on a rain jacket. Let's say they have to go somewhere. They're going to leave a few minutes early, right? Because they can't control the weather and the traffic. So successful people tend to focus more on what they actually have control over. And that generally makes a huge, huge difference. A little quick personal story on that note. So my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer in early January 2020, before the pandemic hit. She was going through chemo. She had surgery in February, all that. So we had all this crap going on in our lives. Our kids were being homeschooled now. My wife was going to chemo by herself. No one could go with her. So there would have really been a time where we could have just really gotten down and negative on ourselves, but we didn't. And we focused on just something real small that we actually could control. And one night we got together as a family. So me, my wife, my son, and my daughter, and we all shaved our heads because my wife was going to lose her hair. And, because we couldn't control everything that we were going through, right? It's just outside of our control. But we did have control over when. And so when we did that, it literally took what could have been, one of the darkest times of our lives, so to speak, and transformed it into this night that we'll all remember as a positive night for the rest of our entire lives. And so that's the power of internal locus of control.
Love that. I'm so glad that's your favorite principle. What an amazing and special night that everybody is going to remember for the rest of their lives. That's totally wonderful. My mom suffered with breast cancer, and so I know how important that was to kind of show that support. And her mantra during the whole thing is just find one good thing. Today might really suck. I might be super tired. Chemo sucks. But if they're, look for one good thing. And I've really loved this last year taking a deep dive into Stoicism and learning some of these Stoic principles and the dichotomy of control, and learning that you have preferred indifferences. You may not want it to rain today. It might be your day off and you might have a great day at the beach planned, but guess what? You don't have control of that, like you said, and it's just a preferred indifference. You can prefer to be healthy. You can prefer to be wealthy. You can prefer to have good weather all the time, but that's not always going to happen. And I just love how pragmatic you were during, first, a very difficult time with COVID, but second, what you must have gone through with not only the homeschooling, but having your wife have all of those things happen all at once, that would crush people without, taking the approach that you did and being pragmatic and saying, look, I can't run the business maybe the way that I want to right now. I have to spend more family time, but maybe I've got extra time that I can write this book and put that out there. I think that's wonderful.
100%, man. I knew I wasn't going to be going anywhere for 4 months or something like that. We were literally in very strict quarantine lockdown because this was early 2020, and she was going through chemo at the time, and there's just so much unknown. I was like, well, I got a couple choices. I can sit and complain and all that stuff, or hey, I can try to make something really good, productive, positive of it, and that's what I did.
I love that. That's fantastic. Tell us, you told us about reading. Tell us the importance of constantly learning and being humble enough to change your mind about things along the way.
Yeah, I certainly don't think I know all that much, and I'm always willing and able to want to learn, grow. And the more you know, the more hopefully just better choices you can make. Man, there's just so many benefits to reading. I don't really know where to start, but man, we live in such an amazing time where there's just so much information, so much free information online that if you really want to learn something, go hop online and just start reading, start learning, check stuff out, watch videos on YouTube, etc. Man, again, this goes back to kind of just being grateful, and you can really get down on stuff, but if you think about all the just wonderful technologies and things that we have nowadays, it's so remarkable that you could go get a college education out there for essentially free online. It's truly amazing.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think of somebody who maybe doesn't know how to cook, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they may have to do some type of classes or training or formal education or whatever. Now it's if you don't know how to cook, just pull up some YouTube videos. You can learn some basic skills that will then enable you to eat healthy for the rest of your life. There's no limits on that kind of stuff. There's so much free content everywhere. You're right. You can become an expert on something without any of that formal training. We do live in an amazing and wonderful time as far as that goes.
100%.
Awesome. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm wondering if you had one simple tip that you would like to leave with the listeners, what would that one thing be?
Oh yeah, I sure do. There's a book called The Slight Edge written by Jeff Olson. I would so highly encourage everyone to go out there and read it and start applying those fundamental principles. It's probably the number one sort of overriding life philosophy that I live by, that I just do the little things. And I'm going to keep doing the little things. And over the long run, I know it's going to pay off in a huge, 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 huge way. So I don't expect huge quantum leaps, although, do I get frustrated from time to time? Absolutely. I'm human, but I just keep doing it, and I just keep going, and I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to keep showing up, and I'm going to keep doing the little things, read a little bit each day, make sure I save and invest and all that stuff. And I know that it's going to pay off in the long run.
Beautiful. Best way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. I love that.
Boom.
Nick Shaw, my man, where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah. So, hey, please come check out us. on Instagram at RP Strength. That's where most people know about us. A lot of cool educational stuff and some pretty inspirational before and afters on there. We actually have a second account. It's RP_transformations that I think has something like 4,000 or 5,000 different client posts. So it's really, really cool. And then myself personally, it's just at nick.shaw.rp on Instagram. I love to connect with people on there. And if you want to check out my book, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Audible as well. There's a little extra podcast in there along with that. Maybe a couple dollars if you do Kindle as well. I just want to get out there and help as many people, man. And then, our website, rpstrength.com, that's a great spot. You can go check out, our coaches, sign up for one-on-one coaching and whatnot, and check out our app as well if you're, pretty experienced with counting macros.
That's fantastic. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Nick Shaw, co-founder of Renaissance Periodization, thank you so very much for everything that you have done. Thank you for taking the time to really individualize these programs and figure out a way to scale this so that it can benefit so many people. Like we said, hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. That must feel amazing, from what you started to have it progress to what it is today. And to always be open to learning and changing things as you go, I think is fantastic. So thank you so very much for you and your career. And thank you very much for appearing on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate it. It was great chatting.
Yeah, it was a great chat. Such an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. As always, thank you so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio. It's really inspiring and amazing to see some of the reviews that we have been getting, and also to receive so many messages and emails about how these episodes have improved our listeners' lives. And so thank you so very much. We are so happy to bring these episodes to you and provide them for free. And we really hope that they help you in your life. We have just passed 2 major milestones, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And basically, we did both of these in pretty much the exact same day. We have just passed 100,000 downloads worldwide of Boundless Body Radio, and we have just launched our 250th episode, which is absolutely amazing. Like I said, I never imagined we could reach that many people. We always want to keep you updated on things that we're doing on our website. So if you go to myboundlessbody.com, you can always see what we're up to. This month, we have a link that you can go and schedule a functional movement screen, which we do virtually over Zoom. A functional movement screen is a series of 7 different movements and 3 different clearing tests, which is designed to find weak links in the body, such as muscle imbalances and joint stability issues. It's a really great tool for discovering inefficient movement, and even if you're not experiencing pain in certain areas of your body, it's something that can prevent injury later on. Some muscles need to be stretched, some need to be strengthened, and we can help you create a plan around that so that you can stay healthy and continue to move well for the rest of your life. So again, you can go and schedule that at myboundlessbody.com. You will also see the other services that we offer. You can always schedule a complimentary 30-minute consultation with us to really chat about anything that you like. And remember, if you are enjoying Boundless Body Radio, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on Apple. It really helps get this passion project out to other people. And thank you again for tuning into Boundless Body Radio.